Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Translation. The great sage Nārada told Dhruva, "My dear boy, you are only a little boy whose attachment is to sports and other frivolities. Why are you so affected by words insulting your honor?" Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Ordinarily, if a child is rebuked as a rascal or fool, he smiles and does not take such insulting words very seriously. Similarly, if words of honor are offered, he does not appreciate them. But in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, the Kshatriya spirit was so strong that he could not tolerate a slight insult from his stepmother, which injured his Kshatriya prestige. Avamānaṁ te sammānam vāpi putraka, lakṣayāmaḥ kumārasya saktasya krīḍana-ādiṣu. So we see that the great sage, Nārada Muni is also addressed as Bhagavan in the Bhagavatam by Dhruva Maharaj, because he is the representative of the Supreme Lord. So we see the great sage Nārada Muni over here is discouraging Dhruva from the path of devotional service. His mother has guided him to execute pure devotional service. In these verses that we have just read, Dhruva Maharaj was being advised by his mother that he should execute devotional service. But over here we see that Nārada Muni is discouraging Dhruva from executing devotional service. In the previous verse, Nārada Muni has pointed out that because you are a Kshatriya, you cannot tolerate a loss of prestige. And over here Nārada Muni is telling Dhruva that, why are you attached to this words of your stepmother? After all, you're only a small boy. And being a small boy, you should be attached to sports and other frivolities. So Nārada Muni is hereby discouraging, it may appear to be discouraging, Dhruva from taking to the path of devotional service. So a question arises at this point, why is it that Nārada Muni is discouraging Dhruva from executing the path of devotional service? Actually, what Nārada Muni is doing, he is testing Dhruva Maharaj's sincerity. Dhruva Maharaj has been greatly offended by his stepmother. His stepmother has more or less told him that you cannot succeed your father to the throne because you have not taken birth from my womb. Actually, what Dhruva Maharaj's stepmother did by preventing him from sitting on their father's lap was to warn him that there is no chance of your becoming a king. So Nārada Muni over here actually is testing. He's testing Dhruva Maharaj as to how intense, how sincere is his determination to serve the Supreme Lord. Nārada Muni wants to make sure that Dhruva Maharaj is sincere in his desire to serve the Supreme Lord. So Nārada Muni over here is actually testing Dhruva Maharaj. So in the next few verses we see that Nārada Muni continues to discourage Dhruva from taking to the path of devotional service. But Dhruva Maharaj then says that you are the representative of Bhagavan. And since you are the representative of Bhagavan, you please help me. By honest means, you please help me in realizing a kingdom that is even more opulent than my father and grandfather. So this was Dhruva Maharaj's desire, that he may realize the most opulent kingdom. And after Nārada Muni saw what was Dhruva Maharaj's desire, then Nārada Muni guided Dhruva Maharaj to approach the Supreme Lord directly. One can approach a demigod, but over here, Dhruva Maharaj wanted a kingdom that was even more opulent than that of Dharma, his grandfather. So, it was nobody else but the Supreme Lord who could grant Dhruva this benediction. So the point is that Nārada Muni guided Dhruva to approach the Supreme Lord. But there's one other thing that we see that is significant in Dhruva Maharaj's request is that he told Nārada Muni that if you can help me, then you please help me, but help me by honest means. It's not that Dhruva Maharaj wanted to realize a kingdom by hook or crook. He wanted to realize this kingdom, a very opulent kingdom, the most opulent kingdom, through honest means. And the honest means refers to taking shelter of the Supreme Lord. This is honesty. In the material world, we do not know what is honesty and what is dishonesty. We are constantly trying to analyze honesty through our mundane senses. But real honesty, as Dhruva Maharaj's instruction is indicating, is to approach the Supreme Lord for whatever one's desire may be. Even if one's desire is material, one should approach the Supreme Lord. That is honesty. So, from the Krishna conscious platform, we understand that honesty means to approach the Supreme Lord for assistance, to approach the Supreme Lord for guidance. So, after Nārada Muni saw that Dhruva Maharaj was completely determined to realize a very opulent kingdom, and he was very determined to approach the Supreme Lord according to the direction of his mother, did Nārada Muni also confirm his mother's advice. So the point is that just like Dhruva Maharaj was determined to approach the Lord, of course one can argue that Dhruva Maharaj had some material ambitions. He had an ambition to realize a very opulent kingdom. But nevertheless, the significant point from the spiritual angle of understanding is that Dhruva Maharaj approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead with determination. So in order to get the mercy of the Lord, one has to be determined. And Dhruva Maharaj performed very great austerities. For example, in the first month of Dhruva Maharaj's austerities, he only ate fruits and berries on every third day. The purpose was just to keep his body and soul together. Basically, that is the desire of the transcendentalist, to eat only as it is necessary to keep the body and soul together. So Dhruva Maharaj, when he started his meditation in the forest, he would eat every third day only fruits and berries. And then in the second month, he ate only every 6 days. Try and understand. In the first month, he ate every 3 days. This is the nature of devotional service. As you advance in your meditation, as you expand your devotional service, you want to reduce your bodily necessities. Now that you increase your bodily necessities. Increasing bodily necessities is not a symptom of spiritual advancement, but rather indicates the opposite. So Dhruva Maharaj, in the first month, he was eating every 6 days. But in the second month, he ate in the first month he was eating every 3 days. But in the second month, he started eating every 6 days. And every 6 days, what did he eat? Only dry grass and leaves. Whereas in the first month, he was also eating fruit. And every 3 days. And then in the third month, he only drank water every 9 days. He was reducing his bodily necessities so that he could completely devote himself to the Supreme Lord. And in the fourth month of his meditation, He became a complete master of the senses, and he inhaled only air every 12th a day. So the point is that Dhruva Maharaj's austerities progressively went on increasing to the point that he wanted to dedicate all his time for the pleasure of the Lord. The devotee is always thinking that he does not have enough time to glorify the Lord. The devotee is always thinking that 24 hours is not enough to glorify the Lord. Hence, the devotee wants to reduce his eating. Hence, the devotee wants to reduce his sleeping. Hence, the devotee wants to reduce his idle thoughts, so that a maximum of attention can be directed towards the Lord. As we enter into the process of devotional service, the doors of liberation open. Just like when you take a coconut out of the coconut tree. As you take the coconut out of the coconut tree, the coconut begins to dry. So as we enter into the process of devotional service, the doors of liberation begin to open. But what is the real goal of the process of devotional service? The real goal of the process of devotional service is to disentangle with the body identification, is to free ourselves from the body identification. And the body identification presents itself in two ways, gross and subtle. We are identifying with this body in a gross manner, and we are identifying with the subtle body. Identification with the subtle body is very dangerous, because when we identify with the subtle body, we tend to listen to the body, to the mind. And if we listen to the mind, then our spiritual advancement becomes extremely precarious and difficult. The living entity is taking on the reaction for the different activities he performs, just like when the air blows. When the air blows, every small objects begin to fly. So similarly, when one executes a life independent of God, independent of the instruction of the scriptures, one is accumulating different karma, and that karma flies when he quits this body to obtain another body. So, the point is that the goal of the process of devotional service is to get out of this bodily identification, to get out with the bodily absorption. Actually, we're absorbed in thoughts of this body. From morning to night, we are absorbed how this body can get a little more comfort, how the tongue can get a little more delicious food stuff, how the different senses can get some more satisfaction. And as long as we are absorbed in this bodily identification, the real purpose of human life cannot be fulfilled. Therefore, the solution is the process of devotional service, which was being explained by Dhruva Maharaj's mother, and which is going to be reinforced in the verses that will follow by even Nārada Muni. So the process of devotional service opens up the door of liberation. The process of devotional service helps us to disentangle from the strong bodily identification that is responsible for all our suffering. Just like when you take the coconut out of the coconut tree, the coconut begins to dry. And if you keep the coconut away from the coconut tree, then the coconut shell, the coconut dries, and it disentangles itself from the shell of the coconut. And then if you move the coconut, you can feel that the coconut inside has disentangled itself from the coconut shell. So similarly, just like the coconut disentangles itself from the coconut shell after the coconut is disentangled from the tree, after it's pulled off the tree. Similarly, the Bhagavatam explains that when we execute the process of devotional service, we can disentangle ourselves from this body. We can disentangle ourselves with this mind, from the subtle body. So we have to become dry we have to disentangle ourselves from this body like the coconut disentangles itself from the shell. So the medium of devotional service is the process how this can be realized. Therefore, the process of devotional service has to be executed with the greatest determination. Sadhu Sangha Sarvachas Rakhaya. Chaitanya Charitamrita states that by the association of sadhu, by the association of saintly people, the purport of the entire Vedic scriptures can be realized. Nārada Muni explained to Dhruva Maharaj that one can obtain three different types of association. The first type of association is when you associate with somebody who is more advanced than yourself. When a devotee gets the opportunity to associate with somebody more advanced than himself, he becomes very, very pleased. The second type of association is the association with those who are less advanced. So when a devotee sees that somebody is less advanced than himself, then he becomes very compassionate upon such an entity. And the third type of association that we can obtain is the association with another person on the same status. So when we get the opportunity to associate with such a person on the same status, the devotee should become very friendly. So, let us analyze these three different types of association that Nārada Muni recommends to Dhruva Maharaj. So the first type is when one gets the opportunity to associate with somebody more advanced, he is very pleased. Now in comparison, what is the law of material nature, or what is the position of the materialist? When a materialist gets a chance to associate with somebody who is more advanced, instead of being pleased, he becomes envious of him. Isn't it? In the material world, when you get the chance of meeting somebody who is ahead of you, you become envious. Oh, how has this person become ahead of me? How has this person attained a higher status than me? Because envy is the guiding principle of material life. And this envy extends itself to I become envious of the Lord. Why will some people detest the process of devotional service? They detest the process of devotional service because they cannot imagine that there is a person who can enjoy more than them. The devotee recognizes that the Lord can enjoy more than them because He is the real enjoyer. Bhoktanam yajataposam sarvaloka maheshwaram sudam sarvabhutanam jyatamam sannam rachati. This is the firm conviction of the devotee. That the Supreme is the enjoyer, He is the creator, He is the well-wisher. And because the devotee understands these three things, he executes the process of devotional service with faith. Dhruva Maharaj is approaching the Lord with determination because he knows that the Lord is the creator. He knows that the Lord is the source of everything. Therefore, he is not approaching his grandfather Brahma for help. Therefore, he is not approaching any demigod for help. But rather, he is approaching the Supreme Lord. In fact, Dhruva Maharaj even asked Nārada Muni to help him. Why? Because Nārada Muni is a pure devotee of the Lord. And because Nārada Muni is the pure devotee of the Lord, Nārada Muni can empower. He can deliver the same thing what Krishna can deliver. Therefore, Dhruva Maharaj addresses Nārada Muni as Bhagwan. Bhagwan is one who is in possession of six opulences to an unlimited degree. So why is it that Dhruva Maharaj has addressed Nārada Muni as Bhagwan? Dhruva Maharaj has addressed Nārada Muni as Bhagwan because he is conveying this path by which one can be brought back to Bhagwan. Therefore, Dhruva Maharaj tells Nārada Muni, "Oh Bhagwan, you may please also help me in realizing a kingdom more often than my grandfather." So, when a transcendentalist meets somebody who is more advanced than him, he becomes very pleased. As we've just finished saying, the materialist, when he meets somebody more advanced than him, he becomes very envious. Because the materialist, he cannot understand how somebody is ahead of him. He wants to think that he's ahead of everybody else. But a spiritualist, of course, doesn't have the same vision. So Nārada Muni advises Dhruva Maharaj that a spiritualist, when he sees that somebody is more advanced than himself, he becomes very pleased. Why? Because he feels that here is an opportunity to make spiritual advancement. Here is an opportunity to gain some spiritual knowledge. The devotee is always anxious to learn. The devotee is always anxious to hear. Therefore, the Vedic scripture says, sadhu sangha, sarva shastra kaya. The entire purpose of these sadhu shastras can be realized by a minute's association with one who is more advanced than oneself. So, the devotee, when he gets the opportunity to associate with somebody who is more advanced, he avails of it. This is the instruction of no less a personality than Nārada Muni. And he is very pleased to avail of that opportunity. And then, when you see somebody who is less advanced than yourself, then what do? When you see somebody who is less advanced, then if you are compassionate, this is a symptom of a transcendentalist. When he sees that I have been fortunate to receive the science by which I can begin to get out of the bodily identification, and he sees that the others were closely involved in bodily identification. What is sense gratification? Sense gratification means just maintaining a false identity. So when the devotee sees those who are less advanced, those who are maintaining a false identity, he feels very sorry for them. And what happens in the material world? In the material world, when you see that somebody is very less advanced than yourself, then you rebuke such a person. Prabhupada explains this. The symptom of the materialist is that when he sees that somebody is less advanced, he rebukes such an individual. But the transcendentalist, when he sees that somebody is less advanced, somebody has a wrong vision, somebody has a wrong understanding, he gets into great anxiety and he becomes compassionate. Just like when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw the condition of the Yavanas, he said, "Ya sabara ho kon mete hidde nistara." He said, "My dear Haridas, looking at the condition of the Yavanas, my heart is beginning to lament." So this compassion must be there. When the devotee sees that here is a new bhakta, here is somebody new who wants to perfect his life, who wants to get out of his body identification, he's anxious to train him up. He's anxious to guide him. When a devotee sees that somebody is blind to the purpose of human life, he's anxious to enlighten such an individual. And when a devotee sees, when he meets somebody else who's on the same level of transcendental realization, in other words, who has also begun the process of self-realization and is on the same level, then what does he do? He makes friendship with such a man. And in the material world, what happens when you meet somebody of an equal status? When you meet somebody of an equal status, you just try to show off, isn't it? When a materialist meets another materialist on the same status, he just tries to show off. He just tries to show off how he is better off than the other person who is on the same status. But the devotee, when he meets another devotee on the same status, he makes friendship with him. He shares his spiritual realization. He is anxious to discuss his spiritual realization. He is joyful at the opportunity to associate with those who are also on the same level. So the point is that the devotees have to work together to spread this Krishna conscious movement. We cannot afford to develop differences with each other. We're too small a community to develop differences if a real goal is to distribute this love of God. If our real goal is to be compassionate upon those who are less advanced, then we have to work together. Like Prabhupada used to say, united we stand, divided we fall. So, if you're willing to share our spiritual realizations, if you're willing to share a spiritual secret, if you're willing to be friendly with each other, then the opportunities, the intelligence, the facilities will gradually go on increasing. We should never forget that Krishna revealed himself in proportion to a degree of surrender. Krishna is testing, just like Dhruva Maharaj and the Supreme Lord. If Krishna wanted, Krishna could have given him the benediction at once. Nārada Muni was requesting, Dhruva Maharaj was requesting Nārada Muni, please give me a kingdom more opulent than Brahma. But what did Nārada Muni do? Nārada Muni told Dhruva Maharaj that you must follow the process of spiritual discipline. Of course, in the beginning, Nārada Muni was testing Dhruva Maharaj. But after Nārada Muni was convinced that Dhruva Maharaj is serious about approaching the Lord, he said, okay, if you want to realize a kingdom more opulent than your grandfather, then you must execute spiritual discipline. Similarly, Arjuna was also advised by Krishna, in order to win this battle, you have to fight. If Krishna wanted, he could have easily made Arjuna victorious. But Krishna did not make Arjuna victorious overnight. He wanted him to practice spiritual discipline and fight. Arjuna did not want to fight. Arjuna was in so many arguments because he was identifying with his mind. But when he surrendered to the superior direction of Krishna and fought, therefore fighting me, he practiced spiritual discipline, then Arjuna became victorious. And Dhruva Maharaj, after he practiced spiritual discipline, he was also successful. So the point is that Krishna reveals in proportion to a degree of surrender. So if we are ready to enforce spiritual discipline upon our mind, if we are ready to enforce spiritual discipline upon our body, if we are ready to enforce spiritual discipline upon these senses, then Krishna's mercy will flow in an increasing manner. Just like when it begins to rain, it doesn't rain all of a sudden. First the drops fall, and gradually the rain increases and then it becomes more and more volatile. So similarly, the process of devotional service also, the Lord's mercy is realized as we surrender. When we depend completely upon the Lord, just like a child depends upon a parent, then the Lord protects such a devotee just like a cow. When a calf is born, the first thing that the calf does when the calf is born is to make sure the calf is fed. And the cow is very protective of the calf. So similarly, just as the cow is very protective of the calf, the devotee is completely protected by the Lord. But the protection that we realize from the Lord is based upon our degree of surrender. So the point is that our goal is to practice spiritual discipline. Our goal is to disentangle ourselves from this shell. Just like we gave the example of the coconut. The coconut, once it's pulled off of the tree, it gradually, as it gets dry, it disentangles itself from the shell. So we have to disentangle ourselves from this shell of material body. As long as we keep ourselves entangled with this shell, as long as we are identifying with this shell will always give us trouble. This body is nothing but a source of misery. Doesn't matter in what position one may be. One may be in an elevated position. One may be in an ordinary position. But this body will always give us trouble, because as long as you're identifying with this body, you're going to identify with the mind also. One may be in an elevated position. One may be in an ordinary position. But this body will always give us trouble, because as long as you're identifying with this body, you're going to identify with the mind also. And what is the nature of the mind? The nature of the mind is to accept and reject. Today, the mind is honored. Today, you've heard some praise, so you feel very honored. Tomorrow, you've heard some criticism, and you feel dishonored. Today, you get what you want, you feel very happy. Tomorrow the Lord is testing you and you do not get what you want, and you become unhappy. So the point is that we have to be determined like Dhruva Maharaj was. This story of Dhruva Maharaj is very important from many, many angles. We may have heard this story many times, but every time you hear this story, a new spiritual angle presents itself. And the spiritual angle that is most important is Dhruva Maharaj's determination to please the Lord. He was determined to go to any degree of austerity, but he did not waver. Even when a great personality like Nārada Muni was trying to discourage him, he did not get discouraged at all. He said, no, I must approach the Supreme Lord. I must. Similarly, we have to keep hammering into our head that I must serve the Supreme Lord. I must execute devotional service. I must surrender to spiritual discipline. We have to keep hammering into our head that I must serve the Supreme Lord. I must execute devotional service. I must surrender to spiritual discipline. These spiritual disciplines, surrendering to the spiritual discipline, is the key to our getting disentangled from ourselves. If we do not surrender to spiritual discipline, then getting disentangled will remain a mystery. Just like very often people come to devotional service, they join the Krishna conscious movement, but because they are not absorbing themselves in the process of devotional service, the beauty of devotional service appears mysterious to them, isn't it? Just like the materialists. They cannot understand how they can be happy avoiding the illicit activities. Each of us has experienced that when we talk to materialists and tell them the 4 pillars of sinful life and tell them that we abstain from these sinful activities, they cannot believe how we can be happy, isn't it? They just cannot understand them. To them, this is a mystery. This is baffling. This is unbelievable. And therefore they accuse us we all are brainwashed. They think that our brain has stopped thinking. Because of them, the power of devotional service is so mysterious. So the point is that the path of devotional service will always appear mysterious unless we surrender completely to the Lord. So similarly, after people even join the movement, because they're not surrendering completely, the spiritual goal appears very mysterious. The process of getting disentangled from this body and mind appears very difficult. So the point is that devotional service is mysterious only to the extent that we do not surrender completely. But once we surrender completely and we depend upon the Lord, then it doesn't appear mysterious at all. Then it doesn't appear baffling at all. Then it doesn't appear difficult at all. So the point is that just like Dhruva Maharaj executed devotional service with determination, we have to be determined. We have to understand and keep reminding ourselves that there is no alternative but devotional service. Prabhupada used to often say that when a devotee understands that he has nowhere else to go but the lotus feet of Krishna, then he is in a safe position. But when we are thinking that I have few other alternatives besides Krishna, and I have to make a choice, which alternative should I choose, then there's a chance you may take shelter of the illusory energy. But when you are constantly reminding yourself that I have nowhere else to go but Krishna, then you struggle. Then you go through the difficulty, just like in these days of high unemployment. Nobody wants to give up his job. When the economy is booming, people are looking for other jobs. But in these days of high unemployment, nobody wants to give up his job, even if the job is unpleasant. Why? Because he has nowhere else to go. So similarly, we have to understand that we have nowhere else to go but the lotus feet of Krishna. And if that is the understanding, then in all situations we will execute devotional service. Then one will never want to abstain from the process of devotional service even for a minute. So the point is that we have to be determined like Dhruva Maharaj was, and if we are determined like Dhruva Maharaj was, then we will be able to get out of this bodily identification. And what is the symptom of getting out of this bodily identification? The symptom is that our feeling of compassion increases. The compassion that we are able to exhibit to those who are less fortunate than ourselves, the compassion that we are able to display towards those who are less learned than ourselves, is exhibited by the desire to bring them to a higher platform. So the point is that, as Nārada Muni said, when a devotee sees that somebody who is less advanced than himself, his heart begins to lament and he feels very compassionate. So we have to feel very compassionate upon those who are blind to the process of self-realization, those who are blind to the cultivation of love of God, those who are blind to the fanning of the dormant love of God that is in the heart. Just like the propensity for fire is there in the wood, you just have to kindle the wood to produce that fire. Similarly, the Chaitanya Charitamrita explains that this love of God is lying dormant. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunaya Shanavadi Sudha Chidekara Udaya. The Krishna Kaviraj explains that this love of Krishna is lying dormant in everyone's heart. So it doesn't matter how sinful the living entity may be, you have to understand that if you approach him with a humble frame of mind, with a desire to enlighten him, then it is possible that even his love of God can be revived. There are instances that even butchers have joined this Krishna conscious movement. Even butchers have become devotees. So you cannot think of this person, the butcher, this person engaged in sense gratification, he cannot be brought to a higher platform. By the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the impossible can become possible. And as the Bhagavad Gita explains, when one approaches the Supreme Lord with faith and determination, then the Lord does two things. The devotee must carefully understand that the Lord does two things. One, he maintains whatever ability we may have. Two, he makes up the shortcomings that we may have. So we may, from our mature ability, from our mature standpoint, think ourselves totally incapable of saving a conditioned soul who is very deep in sense gratification. But if we approach him with love, humility, praying to the spiritual master and to the Lord for mercy, then the impossible can become possible. So the point is that we should always be in a compassionate mood. This is the test of the Vaishnava. When he sees those who are less advanced than himself, how does he view himself? If he sees those who are less advanced than himself and he thinks, oh, I'm too busy now, I have no time to preach, I have to worry about my body, I have to worry about extra prasad, extra rest or whatever. That means the body identification is continuing. And the whole process is to get out of the body identification. The materialist thinks that my concern is my wife, children, parents, brothers and sisters. And therefore after coming to spiritual life, we are still retaining the same vision. Then the coconut will not disentangle itself from the shell. This coconut has to disentangle itself from the shell. We have to disentangle ourselves from this body. And we can only disentangle ourselves from this body if we are constantly engaged in devotional service. The constant engagement in devotional service means that you broaden your spiritual vision. Just like a child as he grows up, the child is beginning to able to absorb more and more, isn't it? As the child grows up, his ability to absorb also increases and he learns more and more. Similarly, with the passage of each day, we have to learn the transcendental science more deeply. We have to understand their philosophy in depth. And if we can understand the philosophy in depth, then this mind will never trouble you. then this body will never trouble you, because you have understood what is spiritual identification. Then you're beyond this gross and subtle influence of this body. Just like walking on the young street, you can see people are walking, they're so absorbed that they don't even think of anything else, isn't it? Sometimes people listen to the Walkman and they're so absorbed in listening to the stereo music that they can't even notice, they even cross the street on a red light. They're so absorbed in just thinking and just listening. So, every material quality has a spiritual counterpart. That you should never forget. Just like material absorption, like when they're watching these baseball games and these football games and these hockey games, the audience is so absorbed in every movement, in which direction the ball is moving, that even if you were to slice a knife on the back, they wouldn't notice it. They're so absorbed in just seeing in which direction the ball is moving, which direction it is going, whether their favorite team is winning or not, that even if somebody takes the money out of your pocket, you can't notice that. In fact, in India, in these big sports events, it is very common to get your pockets for people to pickpocket, because everyone's so absorbed in just watching the game that if somebody puts a hand in your pocket and pulls the purse out, you don't even notice it. So similarly, we have to become completely absorbed. If you're completely absorbed in executing the process of devotional service like Dhruva Maharaj's was, then the lamentation and happiness that accompanies material body doesn't bother us. So we have to broaden our spiritual vision. If we do not broaden our spiritual vision, then spiritual discipline cannot be enforced. Then we may enforce spiritual discipline one day and next day we will not enforce. But we have to enforce spiritual discipline on a constant basis. That means we have to get out of this bodily identification. That means we have to be compassionate upon those who are less fortunate than ourselves. So this compassion is one of the principal features of the Vaishnava. The Vaishnava, as we have often discussed, is very compassionate. But the tragedy is that we are compassionate in theory, but we are not always compassionate in practice. In theory, we all understand that the body is not to be served. In theory, we all understand that we are compassionate. But we have to be compassionate in practice. This love of God has to be awakened in everyone. And this love of God can be awakened in everyone if the resolute determination to make spiritual advancement is there. Dhruva Maharaj very nicely describes Nārada Muni. Dhruva Maharaj says that Nārada Muni is like the sun. What does the sun do? The sun is constantly rotating. To us it may appear that the sun is standing straight and it is fixed. But the sun is constantly rotating. And why is the sun rotating? The sun is rotating to illuminate others, isn't it? The living entity is in darkness, but when the illumination of the sun manifests, the darkness is removed. So, Dhruva Maharaj tells Nārada Muni that you are like the sun that is rotating just for the benefit of others. The sun has nothing to benefit when it is illuminating, when it is rotating. It is just for the benefit of others that the sun is rotating. So similarly, the devotees of this Krishna conscious movement, they have to rotate like the sun. They have to become like the sun, anxious to illuminate those who are in darkness, anxious to enlighten others without expecting anything in return. In the initial stages, the desire to get some return may be there. But as one advances, that desire is eaten up by the desire to just serve Krishna. Just like after Dhruva Maharaj experienced the presence of the Lord, and the Lord asked him what his desire was, he rejected to accept a kingdom more often than Brahma. Now at one time he wanted that. And Dhruva Maharaj gave a beautiful story of a poor man who meets a king. A poor man met the king. And the king asked the poor man, what do you want? And the poor man said, give me some husk of grain. That's all I want. So when you meet a king, you don't ask him, give me some grain. You ask him for something valuable. So similarly, when you approach the Supreme Lord, you don't ask him for something temporary. You ask him for something permanent. And that is the mercy by which one can advance in devotional service. There are different stages. Just like for the mango, there are different degrees. The mango is always sweet, whether it's ripe or unripe, but still ripe is more delicious than the unripe. So similarly, when we're executing devotional service in this body, in this form, devotional service is considered to be unripe. It is unripe in the sense that if we continue to execute devotional service in this body, according to the direction of the Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, then after the termination of this body, you will return to the kingdom of God, where one will execute devotional service very lovingly. And that is called by the Bhagavad, the mango in a ripened state. So at the present moment, devotional service is unripened. But in order to get to the ripened stage, we first have to follow this path. Only then will we experience, only then will we have the opportunity to experience devotional service in a ripened state. So, the point is that there cannot be any compromise on this principle. We may make some minor compromises, but we do not compromise with the senses. Do not compromise with the senses. Always remember, the senses are like the serpent. And just like you can never trust a serpent, as long as the fangs are there, similarly, you cannot trust these senses. These senses cannot be trusted, therefore you do not make compromise. Therefore there are so many rules and regulations. Do this, don't do this, don't do this. For example, the transcendentalist is advised to minimize his association with the opposite sex, even if it is one's wife. One should keep that association to a bare minimum. Why? Why is that instruction there? That instruction is there so that the transcendentalist is prevented from compromising with the desires of his senses. We cannot go on compromising. Just like when a child is growing, if the parents go on compromising with the child, then the child never gets proper training. But if from the moment of 5 the child is disciplined, just like in a Gurukul system. In a Gurukul system, from the age of 5 the child is disciplined. Prabhupada said to the age of 5, give the child what he wants. But from the age of 5, the child has to be even smacked. He has to be disciplined so that he develops good habits. So the Gurukul system means disciplining the child so that he is successful in the ultimate mission of life. Of course, nobody likes discipline, just like even older devotees, when we tell them how to discipline the spiritual life, they don't like it. So similarly, due to the presence of false ego that is there sometimes immemorial, even the child doesn't like to be disciplined. But the parents know that this spiritual discipline is for the ultimate benefit of the child. So similarly, we have to discipline our senses. We cannot compromise. Because if we go on compromising with the dictates of sensory gratification, then the complete potency of devotional service will not manifest itself. So the point is that we have to carefully be aware of what are the do's and don'ts. Just like when you go to a country, to a new country, on the plane they give you a book which says do's and don'ts. It tells you about the customs of that country, tells you what you should do, what you should not do, isn't it? So similarly, we have to be aware of the do's and don'ts to succeed spiritually. So the point is that this feeling of compassion upon those who are less advanced than ourselves will manifest itself if we're trying hard to get out of this bodily identification. Just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates were absorbed in cleaning the Gundicha temple. What were they? They were cleaning the Gundicha temple to cleanse the dirt. Similarly, we have to cleanse this heart. It is not easy to cleanse this heart. It is difficult. But you can cleanse this heart if we execute devotional service with determination. So the point is that as we render devotional service with determination, the resolute determination to become compassionate upon those who are less fortunate than ourselves also increases. The store of love of God has to be emptied out. The beauty of the store of love of God is you can never empty it out completely. In any material reservoir, there is a limit. For example, even the reservoir of oil that is there in the Middle East countries, or even in the prairie provinces in Canada, has a limit. The forecast is that this reservoir is going to last another 20 years and then it's going to run out. In fact, even for water, there are limits when they are forecast that even this water is going to run out. So any mature property, any mature reservoir has a limit. But this spiritual reservoir of love of God has no limit. Therefore, it doesn't matter how much you take out from this tank. There will always be some more. The point is that the devotee, he is attempting to empty out this spiritual reservoir of love of God by distributing this Krishna consciousness. The Chaitanya Charitamrita says, just like the water falls from the clouds and then there is coolness. Similarly, the devotee understands that everyone is being burned by mature activities. Mature activities are constantly burning us. About this, there should be no two opinions. Just like if you ask even any of a Gurukul's children to draw God, they will all draw Krishna. No one's going to draw God with a beard or God in a suit or God some imaginary God. He will all draw Krishna with a peacock feather. Their drawings may have little variance depending upon their ability, but they'll all say Krishna is God. Go to any Gurukul student and ask him, who is God? Krishna is God. Who is the mercy incarnation of God? Lord Chaitanya. They'll all give you the same answer as is shown in the Hare Krishna Synonyms. So, similarly, in the devotee's mind, there is no doubt that any mature activity, any mature attempt at finding happiness is actually going to result in being burnt. That firm conviction must be there. If that firm conviction is there, that material activity means constantly burning yourself. And when the rays of the heat are very strong, what does one wish? For rain. Those of you who've been to India in the summer season can testify when it gets very hot, like in northern India it gets very hot, people are just praying, please may the rainfall come. When there's drought, people are just waiting, oh please may the rainfall come. Because the rainfall can come and take away the heat there. So similarly, the devotee understands that mature activity needs constantly being burnt. And unless there is the distribution of this love of God, which is compared to cooling rain, there will not be happiness. So we have to be determined to distribute this love of God. According to time, place, circumstances, the technique may vary, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When the Mayavadi philosophers were coming to meet him, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was always thinking of some tricks, how we could engage them in devotional service. Isn't it? He was always thinking of some tricks. How can I engage? And when they would walk away, he would feel very sorry that his tricks did not work. So similarly, the devotee is always meditating. How can we engage such an individual in love of God? In order to engage people in love of God, sometimes we may have to use paraphernalia or whatever. But as long as the goal is engaged in devotional service, as long as the goal is to shower them with love of God, the activity is purifying and it's an indication of our understanding this transcendental philosophy. So the point is that this love of God has to be distributed freely. The Supreme Personality of Godhead can make the devotee even more powerful than himself. This should not be underestimated. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to destroy Jagai and Madai, but Nityananda prevented him. So the point is that the devotee is freely distributing this love of God. Ena prema Sri Chaitanya dila yatha tatha Jagai Madai paryanta mera tatha. So as the Chaitanya Charitamrita states, this love of God has to be distributed freely, and it was distributed even to Jagai and Madai, the most obnoxious nectars. And as Prabhupada has often explained, today there are nectars at every corner. There is no shortage of nectars. And just like Nityananda Prabhu was able to change Jagai and Madai, just like Arjuna was given the credit to be victorious on the battle of Kurukshetra, just like Hanuman was made the hero because he helped Lord Ramachandra reclaim Sita. Hanuman was able to jump over the entire Indian Ocean in one leap. In one leap he went from one place to Sri Lanka. He jumped over the entire Indian Ocean in one leap. And when he was able to throw stones in the water, and those stones were floating. Normally when you throw a stone in a river, the stone goes right down. But because the most desire of the Lord was there, those stones were floating. And Hanuman was made the hero of Sita's rescue. So similarly, the devotee can be made the hero by the mercy of the Lord. The Lord is ever anxious that the devotee may surpass him. That is the desire of the Lord, believe it or not. Just like Nityananda Prabhu, he surpassed Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Hanuman, he surpassed Lord Ramachandra. So similarly, it is the desire of the Lord that the devotee may surpass him. Just like Prabhupada was once telling one of my godbrothers in India, that the spiritual master is anxious that his disciple may even surpass him in what he's done. So the point is that due to the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jao they may have faced few Jagai and Madai, if we take this Krishna conscious message seriously, if we execute devotional service with determination, if we understand that our real business is to be compassionate upon those who are less advanced, we can also elevate the present lecture into the position of devotee. This is not difficult. This is not impossible. All that is needed is determination, and the classic example of determination is Dhruva Maharaj's life, which we have been discussing, how Dhruva Maharaj was determined to realize an opulent kingdom. So our determination is not to realize an opulent kingdom. Our determination is to be engaged in the cause of devotional service and to be compassionate upon those who are less compassionate. So we do not laugh upon those who are less advanced. We do not ridicule them. Rather, we display our compassion by taking steps by which, by making the effort by which, these conditioned souls can be brought to the platform of devotional service. So, to summarize, Dhruva Maharaj is being tested by Nārada Muni about his determination to serve Krishna, and Dhruva Maharaj comes out successful in the test, and the Supreme Personality of God manifested his transcendental form, because Dhruva Maharaj executed devotional service with complete determination.